Following breaking news, a new report in the Wall Street Journal says the special counsel Robert Mueller's investigators are asking questions about an August 2016 email in which Trump ally Roger Stone wrote he dined with the WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. Let's bring in our analysts. And Biana, how would this email fit into the bigger picture that we've seen emerging between the Trump campaign and WikiLeaks, if at all?
Well, Roger Stone has been at the front of this relationship with WikiLeaks, and whether or not there had been a relationship, there's this recurring theme of had he spoken with Julian Assange, when did he speak with WikiLeaks? The Atlantic had earlier in this year reported about communications between WikiLeaks and Julian Assange, some Twitter exchanges on October 13th and then again on November 9th, and they were actually pretty heated. It seemed that Roger Stone might have even been a bit offended at how WikiLeaks had been treating him or what they may have tweeted about him. But this is the first time we're hearing about this earlier communication. And aside from Roger Stone, who, by the way, said this was some joke, I don't know what's so funny about joking about dining with Julian Assange. He said he has some proof and airline tickets, what have you. So there's clearly more to investigate here. But he's not the only one of the Trump camp in the Trump circle to have communicated with WikiLeaks. Remember the report that Donald Trump Jr. had been exchanging DMs with WikiLeaks as well. So all of this is confusing, at the same time offers a potentially huge treasure trove for the Mueller investigation. And
tomorrow, Jeffrey, you want to make a point, Jeffrey?
Well, I just remember, Mueller has already filed an indictment of 13 Russians in connection with the social media attempt to influence the campaign. What he has not yet done is file any criminal charges in connection with the hacking, the WikiLeaks obtaining of the DNC emails and the John Podesta emails. Sorry about that. Those emails. That part of the case has not yet been filed. That's the part of the case that Roger Stone is relevant to. So this part of the investigation would certainly be very much alive at this point.
And Jeffrey, put on your legal hat once again. Tomorrow's the first sentencing of any of the suspects who have pled guilty now in Robert Mueller's investigation. This 33-year-old Dutch lawyer, Alex van der Zwaan, worked for a major U.S. law firm. He's about to be sentenced tomorrow. What might we learn in the context of that?
Well, I got to say, probably not much. What's unusual about his guilty plea is that there was no cooperation agreement. He didn't agree to cooperate because apparently he had nothing to offer the special counsel. Now, that's somewhat peculiar because in the sentencing process, the special counsel's office has indicated that he did have information about Rick Gates communicating with individuals who may be affiliated with Russian intelligence. So I don't anticipate that van der Zwaan will get any jail time. I mean, his sentencing guidelines suggest that probation is a possibility. That seems likely. But his future involvement in the investigation is somewhat mysterious because of this lack of a cooperation agreement.
He's pleading guilty to lying to federal investigators, and that's a felony. Sabrina, he did have a close relationship, apparently, for a while with Rick Gates, who was the deputy Trump campaign chairman, who apparently also had a relationship with someone the U.S. considers a Russian intelligence operative.
Right. That was one of the key pieces of information that we learned from these court filings and the contacts with this individual who may have been linked to Russian intelligence. That continued in October of 2016, so just in the weeks leading up to the November election. I also think it's significant to note that according to court filings, van der Zwaan not only withheld but potentially destroyed documents that the special counsel's office is arguing could be very material to the investigation. This also leads back in some ways to Paul Manafort. I think this helps the special counsel build his case against Paul Manafort, who has resisted thus far a plea deal. We know Rick Gates is already cooperating with the special counsel's office.
We know, Chris, that on March 20th, the president had a phone conversation with Vladimir Putin. Yep. He congratulated him on his win, even though his advisor said, do not congratulate. Didn't raise some of the most sensitive issues, including Russian meddling in the elections or the poison attack on an ex-Russian spy in England. But apparently now the Russians are pointing out, the White House is not necessarily denying it, the President Trump, actually raised the possibility of inviting President Putin to the White House.
Yeah, in fact, just to add to the White House not denying it, what they're essentially saying, Wolf, is we broached this already. The issue is we didn't necessarily invite him to the White House. We said we'll figure out some locations where it can happen. In a vacuum, okay, consistent with Donald Trump promising he wants to redo our relationships around the world, renegotiate them, whether that's through trade, whether it's through diplomacy. Of course, the world doesn't exist in a vacuum. There's a lot of water under the Russia bridge at this point, most notably the poisoning of the former Russian spy, the meddling in the election. And I'll remind people, Donald Trump's response to Vladimir Putin saying he didn't do it was, well, what do you want me to do? He said he didn't do it. So, you know, given all of that context, it's, I would say, surprising that Trump has been as willing as he has been. I guess maybe not all that.
You know, Bianna, you're an expert on Russia. Is that a big deal if Putin comes to the White House as an Oval Office meeting with the president? Maybe they have a joint news conference. They have a couple of perks that go on. How big of a deal would that be for the Russian leader?
It would be a huge win for Vladimir Putin and a huge slap in the face for England, our closest ally, and Theresa May. But in addition to that, this is not the first time that Russia has preempted U.S. and the White House with coming out with this type of information about their phone conversations. This is probably the second or third time that the Kremlin has released information that the White House would then have to walk back or sort of deny or corroborate, but say that's not really how it transpired. So you're put in a position where you don't know who to believe, the Kremlin or the White House. And what's also curious is that the Kremlin had been clearly sitting on this information for a few weeks now. That conversation was on March 20th. Why they decided to release that today is a bit curious, to say the least.
And by the way, just to beyond, just to add a little meat to that point, Sergei Kislyak and Sergei Lavrov, the meeting in the Oval Office with Donald Trump, we learned about from the Russians first,
right.
Not from, there it is, right, not from the White House, which again I think is worth noting.
The foreign minister and the president of the United States and the former Russian ambassador Kislyak to the United States.